According to comedian Jeff Allen, teenagers are God's revenge on mankind. God wanted humans to know what it felt like to make someone in your own image that denies your existence. Today I will try to convince you that the Bible is infallible, that man is fallible, and that God is the judge, not the defendant. The reason this is important is because 70 to 88% of Christians abandon their faith, they deny the existence of their Creator in their freshman year of college. And we don't want to raise that statistic. We will look at the fact that without God and the Bible, you have nothing. That God is not on trial, and we will take a brief examination of our 3 assignment quotes for apologetics. So without God, you have nothing. Without the Bible, which is God's inspired word, you cannot argue at all. It has been said by some that Christianity has done young people a disservice by teaching them to rely on the Bible and then throwing them out into the real world where the Bible no longer counts as a valid argument. The reason that the Bible doesn't count as a valid argument to the rest of the world is because, according to Romans 1, 20 and 21, for the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Let me break this down for you. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world, we cannot see God, the creator of the world, are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made. We, the things that are made, can clearly see the evidence of God's handiwork, his creation, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Everyone knows there's a God. Everyone. Because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. We all know that there is a God, but we suppress that knowledge. Why? Because if someone owns this world, you better find out who he is and what he wants, and we don't want to do that. Let's jump into the hypothetical for a moment. There's no God. We were banged into existence and have been evolving ever since. Is it wrong for me to kill him? If you say yes, it is wrong, what are you basing that on? Whether we want to or not, the whole world borrows from Christianity's rights and wrongs. The other thing we lose with God is reason. Why, if there is no God, no judge, no afterlife, no motive for doing anything here on earth besides having a pleasurable time, would people like Stephen Hawking or Richard Dawkins go out of their way to try and convince anyone of the issues with their faith? If this is all that you get, I'd be off at the beach. But people do know that God exists, and their foolish hearts are darkened, and they work to undermine and attack his followers. So that's another disservice we do to God, by putting him on trial. We say God's the defendant, we're the attorney, and the atheist or whoever we're talking to is the judge. We bring the evidence, and we hope we can bring enough to persuade the judge that our side is right. What is wrong with this idea? First of all, the creator of the universe is not on trial before his creation. God does not need us, fallen, fallible human beings, to defend him. People do not come to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ by how good of a lawyer we can be. That only happens when God draws them to himself, as John 6:44 says. No man can come to me except the Father which has sent me draw him, and I will raise him up at the last day. God is actually the judge. He made a set of rules by which we are to live called the 10 Commandments. We, each and every one of us, have broken these commandments. Having done this, we are on trial before God for our sins. Psalms 14:1 says, the fool has said in his heart. Notice it says the fool, not the educated atheist. There is no God. They are corrupt. They have done abominable works. There is none that does good. So because the atheist is not judged and does not get to decide which evidence we can bring, like science, and which evidence they won't accept, like the Bible, we do not need to limit ourselves in this way. If someone tells you you can't prove the Bible is true by using the Bible, ask them to prove to you that the president lives in the White House without looking in the White House. Trying to make a point using the opponent's evidence, for example, us trying to prove our point by using their science, is like going to a fight and letting your enemy determine your weapon. Using that line of thought, we should force atheists to prove evolution to us using the Bible, since we don't believe in their science. So with all that in mind, let's take a brief look at the 3 statements in our apologetics homework. We have 2 that come from Richard Dawkins and 1 from Stephen Hawking. We'll start with the one from Stephen Hawking. One can't prove that God doesn't exist, but science makes God unnecessary. So to analyze and respond to this statement, I would have to say that it's completely false, both the first and the second part. Unlike every other faith and religion, Christianity is the only one that you can disprove. simply show that one prophecy wasn't fulfilled, that Jesus didn't rise from the dead, or one contradiction in the Bible, and the whole thing falls apart. If the Bible falls apart, so does God, because this is his inspired word. Religions like Mormonism, however, can't be disproved. You can't prove that an angel didn't come down to Joseph Smith while he was alone and show him tablets before leaving and taking the tablets, all evidence of his visit, with him. By the way, this is the lowest level of arguing ever. This is the same thing as when your older brother tells you he saw a tiny pink elephant flying through the air. You ask him to show you, but he can't. So you disclaim his discovery. However, he points out to you that you can't prove him wrong without looking over the whole world. Therefore, his discovery stands. And how does science make God unnecessary? A simple analogy would suffice to show the ridiculousness of this claim. I have a watch. It's a Timex Ironman. It came with an instruction manual on how to work it. I didn't read the instruction manual, but simply push random buttons and postulate what they do. My possibly and likely wrong assumptions don't make the instruction manual that came with the watch, unnecessary. The only thing it does is prove that I'm a fool. So let's take a look at the next statement. God stands out in the universe as the most glaring of all superfluous sore thumbs. Richard Dawkins has been referred to as the most famous atheist in the world. And yet here he admits that God exists, as everyone knows that God does. Dawkins is just not willing to admit that God has a place. He is just an extra, useless, sore thumb. This is the biased opinion of a flawed human being. We showed in the first point that without God in the Bible, you lose morality and the ability to reason and argue. That does not sound extra and useless to me. The final statement from Dawkins: faith is the great cop-out, the great excuse to evade the need to think and evaluate evidence. So first of all, as human beings, we do not and cannot understand everything that God does. How can someone be 100% God and yet 100% man? We have faith that that is possible, though we don't actually know how that works. So yes, our religion is based on faith. Secondly, I would like to point out that belief in evolution requires faith as well, and that it actually requires more faith than Christianity. Which is harder to believe, that God made everything, or that a tornado came through a junkyard and made a perfect brand new bicycle? Actually, without the junkyard. So a tornado of nothing came through a junkyard of nothing and made humans, which is infinitely harder than a bicycle. That kind of faith excuses the need to think and evaluate evidence. So to bring this all together, I completely understand that the point of asking us to use other sources than the Bible is mainly to cause us to learn to research more than one source for our speeches. But the Bible is still still the most valid source of information and belongs in an apologetic speech. Bible verses are arguments. We are not here to fight with the enemy's weapons. Saying that you must not use the Bible because I don't believe in it is akin to sitting in the middle of the highway because I don't believe in trucks. We can use the Bible while still learning how to research other sources. Let's not be the Christians that lose their faith in the first year of college. Thank you.